Medics were among the bravest troops on the battlefields of World War II, and today they are often misunderstood. There are many misconceptions about U.S. medics during the war, especially regarding how they were treated by the enemy. We'll explore how U.S. medics were treated in Europe compared to the Pacific during World War II. Along the way, we'll discuss how this treatment affected their jobs, how they identified themselves, and what weapons they carried. Let's dive into how being a medic was intended to work during World War II. Then we can discuss how that plan actually played out on the battlefield. As medics quickly learned, the strategies devised on paper often fell apart when the fighting began. During World War II, medical personnel were meant to be classified as non-combatants. This classification was established by the Geneva and Hague Conventions, emphasizing their neutrality. Essentially, medics were to be completely separate from the ongoing fighting. They could be in the same area, but their focus was solely on medical needs. They were prohibited from engaging in fighting with the enemy. In return, they received certain protections as long as they identified as non-combatants. The enemy was not allowed to target them in battle if they adhered to these rules. At that time, the Geneva Convention didn't explicitly state that medics couldn't be armed. It only mentioned that engaging in combat would mean losing their non-combatant status. The U.S. military interpreted this to mean medics could not carry weapons at all. On the other hand, countries like Germany allowed medics to carry weapons for self-defense. Many German medics carried pistols throughout the war. The absence of weapons left U.S. medics extremely vulnerable on the battlefield. However, the military believed that not carrying weapons helped them be seen as non-combatants. I mentioned earlier that medics needed to identify themselves as non-combatants to receive protection. So what was the plan to do that effectively? Every medic was issued a Red Cross armband, worn on the left arm at all times. This armband signified their non-combatant status. In theory, all medics across the war would use this system to identify themselves, and it would ideally create a very clear distinction between combatants and non-combatants. However, the reality was often much different in practice. That's what we'll explore in more detail as we dive deeper into the experiences of U.S. medics. Join me as we uncover the truths and challenges that these brave individuals faced. Their journey reveals not only the bravery, but also the complexities of their role in warfare. The stories of these medics deserve to be told and understood. Let's remember their sacrifices and contributions throughout history, and continue to learn about the vital role they played in World War II. It's easy to identify who was a medic and who wasn't. That distinction was clear. You might wonder about those iconic Red Cross helmets worn by many medics during the war. We'll discuss those helmets in detail later in this video. However, those helmets were not standard issue items, contrary to popular belief. Instead, medics wore a simple Red Cross armband, but that didn't mean they were never targeted. Now, let's delve into what really happened on the battlefield, starting with Europe. For the most part, when fighting the Germans and Italians, medics' non-combatant status was respected. However, there were many exceptions where this respect did not apply. We'll explore those exceptions more in a moment. Generally speaking, mutual understanding played a role in this respect. Both sides had medics, and they realized that shooting one would lead to retaliation. This mutual agreement formed the foundation of their interactions. So, how did this agreement impact the work of medics? I've been using the term medics quite generally, but there were various roles. Medical personnel filled numerous roles during World War II. This also extended to other branches of the military. We'll also discuss the role of medical corpsmen in the Pacific. However, many experiences were similar across theaters. For instance, a medic in a field hospital had a very different experience compared to a medic embedded within an infantry rifle company. Frontline aid men in Europe had to exercise heightened caution. They were at high risk, even if not deliberately targeted. Battles would not pause simply because of a Red Cross symbol. Medics often found themselves on the receiving end of enemy fire, even when the fire wasn't specifically directed at them. Medics frequently left the safety of their foxholes to help others. This put them at the mercy of the enemy. It was an extremely dangerous job to undertake. Interestingly, despite the risks, there were moments of cooperation. Medics would sometimes work together to treat the wounded. Additionally, when captured by the enemy, medics were often treated differently. Instead of being sent away with other POWs, they received special treatment. Medics continued their crucial work, treating wounded soldiers during the war. They were in high demand from both sides. There were many instances where a medic was captured and sent to work in a field hospital. Sometimes, they worked as stretcher bearers alongside enemy medics. Their skills were valuable resources for both sides. Medics stationed further from the front lines enjoyed more safety than those at the front line. However, they were still not completely safe. Medical installations avoided enemy bombing due to mutually assured destruction. Both sides acknowledged that bombing hospitals would result in retaliation, and no one wanted that outcome. Yet in a war as vast as World War II, exceptions were common, especially near the front lines. Aid stations, while generally safe, sometimes fell victim to artillery and bombings. Prominently marked ambulances were frequently used in Europe, respected by both sides despite some exceptions. Footage shows U.S. medics waving a Red Cross flag as they move into the open to collect the wounded. These medics understood their best chance of survival was the enemy recognizing the Red Cross flags. Now, let's discuss how this recognition influenced what U.S. medics wore in Europe. Initially, medics were issued a single Red Cross armband, which was the standard identification. At the war's outset, this armband was often all that medics wore for identification. As the war progressed, medics realized the enemy typically respected the Red Cross symbol. They sought more ways to make the symbol more visible on their uniforms. There were reports that many medics were shot on their right side, which was unmarked. German POWs indicated that the Red Cross armband was hard to see in the chaos of battle. Consequently, many medics began wearing multiple Red Cross armbands for better visibility. They painted Red Crosses on their uniforms and gear, and carried Red Cross flags. Medics also marked their helmets with the Red Cross symbol for identification. This helmet marking became common because it was often the first thing seen in battle. Popping out of a foxhole, the scene was a big canvas for painting Red Crosses. Early in the war, you often saw medics tucking medical armbands into their helmet nets. They also used tape to create crosses on their helmets. As the war progressed, these markings evolved into various painted Red Cross designs. By the end of the war, some units had standardized helmet markings for their medics. In some cases, the chief surgeon specified what type of markings should be used. However, there was no standardized pattern for painting these helmets. The markings were often applied by hand in the field. You can see everything from simple crosses with a white outline to big white circles. Some helmets had arcs with crosses in the middle, or fully white helmets with red crosses. It's common to see different markings on medics, even within the same unit. Interestingly, some frontline medics camouflaged their Red Cross helmets. This might make sense, wanting the enemy to see the Red Cross or not at all. I don't understand why they didn't just paint more Red Crosses around the helmet. Perhaps they wanted to lay face down and still have the Red Cross visible. While standing up and moving around, they might have wanted to remain concealed. In any case, I'm not questioning it. These guys knew what they were doing. It's interesting to note that Red Cross markings on helmets were common in Italy before D-Day. However, during the D-Day invasion, it was rare to see medics with marked helmets. This was mainly due to fears that Germany might target medics out of desperation. While Germany didn't specifically target medics in Italy and North Africa, things changed. On D-Day, some U.S. medics did sport helmet markings, but most chose armbands. They opted for armbands to remain less conspicuous during the invasion. Following D-Day, medic helmets made a significant comeback as confidence grew. Troops felt assured they wouldn't be targeted because they were medics. They carried large flags, painting enormous red crosses all over their helmets. The Germans used these vests with red crosses, inspiring some U.S. troops to copy the style. There are only a few pictures of these tabards in use, but they're hard to miss. Now, like we discussed, medics were essential during the war. Medics held a wide variety of roles on the battlefield, engaging different soldiers across numerous areas. While some medics sought prominent ways to identify themselves, others in Europe chose to blend in, avoiding Red Cross insignias. For instance, 82nd Airborne Medic Dwayne Pinkston wore his Red Cross armband, but hesitated about using a Red Cross helmet. He stated that they avoided the helmet, believing it made for too good a target. Next, let's explore the types of weapons medics carried in Europe. The initial plan was for medics to remain unarmed, which was generally upheld in Europe. However, medics often carried some type of fighting knife for practical reasons, not as a violation of the Geneva Convention. Some medics chose to conceal a small pistol as a last resort, though most believed this increased their risk. It was quite rare to see armed medics in Europe, but it did occur occasionally. John Birch, a medic from the 99th General Hospital, shared his experience during the Battle of the Bulge. He explained that their general couldn't order them to carry weapons, but advised they could choose. Consequently, they taped over their steel helmets, hid their identification, and were given pistols. They felt uncertain about using the weapons but never wore their Red Crosses again. By now, it's clear that if you were a medic in Europe, the enemy typically wouldn't target you deliberately. However, numerous exceptions existed, especially with the Waffen-SS, known for disregarding these rules. They were notorious for shooting U.S. medics, which is tragic but not surprising given their reputation. Many U.S. medics reported feeling deliberately targeted by enemy forces during combat. Ted Klaperich, a combat medic from the 321st Medical Battalion, shared his perspective. He noted that there were instances where Allies also shot at German medics. German medics often carried pistols, which, despite being for self-defense, made them appear more threatening. 99th Infantry veteran Risto Milosevic recalls a specific story from the Battle of the Bulge. That concludes our discussion about medics in Europe, but the situation in the Pacific was entirely different. In Europe, there was a mutual understanding about the treatment of medics. If one side harmed the enemy's medics, retaliation would follow. However, this understanding did not exist in the Pacific with the Japanese forces. The Japanese army had medics, but their expectations differed significantly. Japanese medics often lacked any identifying insignia, which made them vulnerable. They saw no reason to spare U.S. medics in combat. Despite pledging to adhere to the First Geneva Convention, the Japanese did not honor these commitments during World War II. They not only disregarded the non-combatant status of U.S. medics, but specifically targeted them, understanding their critical role in the military. The presence of a medic provided comfort to U.S. troops, ensuring soldiers received essential health checks during battle. If a medic was taken out, soldiers knew they would likely not receive critical care if injured. This understanding affected their morale. The Japanese targeted medics to disrupt the effectiveness of U.S. troops, believing it would prevent wounded soldiers from returning to fight. They were probably correct in their assessment. However, this targeting also meant risking the wrath of U.S. troops seeking vengeance. We explored how vulnerable medics were on the battlefield, often treating wounded soldiers in exposed positions. The Japanese army extensively employed snipers during the war, making it easy for them to pick off U.S. medics. Some reports suggest that Japanese forces would lure U.S. medics into the open, using tactics like yelling medics in English. This tactic was a cruel strategy to eliminate medics in the field. Now, let's discuss how this affected their ability to do their jobs. I've been using the term medics for simplicity, but it's essential to note that this also includes Navy corpsmen attached to the Marine Corps. We will hear some quotes from those veterans soon. Since medics were targeted, they had to exercise even more caution. Unlike in Europe, where medics marked themselves with a big red cross, doing so in the Pacific would have been a death sentence. This reality made it significantly more challenging for medical personnel to recover the wounded on the battlefield. Despite the heightened risks, frontline aid men still had a critical job to perform. They often exposed themselves to help their fellow soldiers. As for evacuating the wounded, Marked ambulances were still occasionally seen on the battlefield, albeit with caution. In the Pacific, many operations occurred further behind the front lines. You often see unmarked vehicles transporting the wounded. Aid stations weren't as visibly marked in the Pacific as they were in Europe. When possible, they were set up in bunkers. This was due to the heightened risk of artillery and bombing attacks in the region. It's clear that safety was a priority. By now, you can probably guess how medical personnel felt about wearing big red crosses on their uniforms. But I'll let Mr. Richard Fallon, who served as a Navy corpsman, explain that. He shares his first-hand experience. Even though I was a medic, we had to carry armament. The Japanese didn't care about the Red Cross at all. They paid no attention to that. In fact, they'd rather kill you because they knew you were saving lives. We did not wear a Red Cross on our helmet. No, it was common for medical personnel not to wear any identifying marks. This was done to avoid being targeted by the Japanese forces. Greg Emery, another corpsman, shared this perspective. The reason they don't put a Red Cross on you is because it became a target for the Japanese gunners. Now, this video is not about movies, but many people associate this lack of markings with a specific film scene. In that scene, a more experienced medic advises Desmond Doss to remove his Red Cross armband. It's a critical moment. He tells Doss to trade his Red Cross helmet for an unmarked one. Medics were deliberately targeted during combat. They lose all their Red Cross markings. Medics were viewed as a prime target for enemy fire. The whites are bullseyes. Here, I got you a new helmet. One size fits all. This scene is pretty accurate. It's true that Desmond Doss didn't wear any type of Red Cross markings. Unless you count this tiny little cross on his medical bag, it's a subtle yet significant detail. I believe it's unlikely that he would have arrived there with a Red Cross helmet initially. As we discussed, many soldiers painted their helmets in theater. People in the Pacific already knew better than to do that. Not to mention that in real life, Doss had already seen plenty of combat by the time that scene takes place. But that's a whole other topic. We already covered that U.S. medics were not supposed to carry weapons. They were considered non-combatants, which raised a significant question. If they removed all their Red Cross markings, what then? If they didn't benefit from that protected status anyway, what reason did they have to not carry weapons? Most U.S. medical personnel in the Pacific thought the same way. They often sought out weapons for self-protection. Typically, this became extremely common among them. The need for self-defense was paramount in such dangerous conditions. Medics in battle often carried light weapons that would not interfere with their duties. These weapons provided a means for medics to protect themselves if necessary. Additionally, carrying a weapon helped medics blend in with the troops. Without a weapon and in full medical gear, a medic could easily be targeted. This added a layer of safety, especially for those in the Pacific Theater. Many medics opted for compact setups instead of traditional gear. Corpsman Dwight Carter described always carrying an M1 carbine in the Pacific. Most medics relied on their weapons as a last resort. Like Mr. Carter, many medics never fired their weapons while caring for patients. Sidney Savage, a U.S. Army medic, noted he never fired in combat. He said, "People were falling all around me." Not all medical personnel refrained from using their weapons during combat. When Cram saw a target, he didn't hesitate to shoot. He described carrying both a .45 and a carbine. He attempted to fire at Japanese soldiers moving ahead. However, he couldn't recall ever hitting anyone. In the Pacific, many medics abandoned their Red Cross emblems. As the war progressed, they armed themselves more frequently. In contrast, European medics added more Red Crosses to their uniforms. This highlights the differing dynamics of combat in various theaters. In every theater, U.S. medics worked tirelessly to save lives. They showed little regard for their own safety. Thank you for watching and supporting my work. I hope my explanation was clear and insightful. It's important to understand the varied experiences of medics in World War II. Medics in different areas faced vastly different circumstances. Thank you to my Patreon supporters this month: Corey Mahler, Emily Hensley, and NCR Trooper Scout. Your support means a lot. I truly appreciate your support for my work on this page. If you're interested in supporting my channel, you can visit my Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Now, I want to share one last quote from Sidney Savage. This quote beautifully summarizes the daily life of a combat medic during the war. I would be patching them up, knowing they weren't going to live. But I talked to them all the time as though they were alive.